Hey, what's up, everyone? Dave here. Welcome to episode 55 of the Pocket Mastermind podcast. On today's episode, I'm talking to Murielle Fellous. Murielle is a coach and also runs a website called Single Moms Doing It All. Murielle works with single moms to help them navigate through the challenges of parenthood and overcome anxiety and depression through different coaching techniques, through spiritual practices, through meditation, a whole bunch of stuff. And we touch on so much during this episode. I think you're going to get an awful lot out of it. So I hope you enjoy this. Before we get into it, please remember to like, share, follow, all of that stuff that helps me to get out to more people. So with that, let's get on with the show. So the big question is this: how do ordinary people like us that weren't born into money create true financial freedom, take back control of our lives, and live a life full of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. Join me and follow along as I learn, apply, and share the strategies that the wealthy know and use that the rest of us weren't taught to create true financial freedom. My name is David Bell, and welcome to Pocket Mastermind. Murielle, welcome to the Pocket Mastermind podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You run a website and a podcast called Single Moms Doing It All. And tell us a bit about that. Where did it come from? Where did that all start?
So it was actually it was a turn that I took in my business because I was coaching on dating and relationships for years. And at one point when my kids became teenagers, me being a single mom, they started exploring a little bit too much, acting out. Mm-hmm. And without realizing, I got overwhelmed. I was also struggling with some health stuff. And I spiraled slowly into depression without realizing that I was, until I got to a point where I caught myself saying things like, I would love for it to just stop. I wouldn't like thinking about killing myself, but if I could disappear, I would be fine with it because everything was too much on me. So when I fully realized that I was in depression, I said, okay, I need to do something about it. Because I had many tools as a coach and I was practicing some for years already, I doubled on what I was doing. I literally took myself as if I was a client, and I started first using thought interruption, because you have those cycle of thoughts that bring you even deeper, and the body reacts to thoughts, and the brain sends you biochemicals and you go into negative emotions, and then it's the opposite. Yeah, and then you have even more thoughts about negative stuff. So I got in the habit to become very aware of my thoughts, and I have techniques.
So I was going to say, what do you do to interrupt those thoughts?
So I worked on becoming aware. Mm-hmm. And when my awareness became, because I was waking up in the middle of the night with anxiety attacks, I was afraid that my kids would be stupid enough to take something at a party and end up dead. You never know. Mm-hmm. And I noticed how I was feeling. I was waking up, palpitations and everything. And I said, okay, I need to bring my mind somewhere else. So I teach people that a thought is not who you are. It's like a train that you take. You can get out. When you have those ski poles that you hold on to, people think they have to do that with a thought and not let go. So I force myself to let go. And then I used a technique called emotional freedom technique, or tapping, which is a combination of using the ancient knowledge like the acupuncture meridians and modern psychology. And what it does, it actually talks with the stress center in your brain, and it literally intercepts the stress response in your body to a point where the neuro association between what you're thinking about and the stress, the anxiety, is broken. So slowly, you start installing new neural associations with that specific topic or that specific concern, and you react less and less. And then you're able to go and pick a more positive thought, because if you don't intervene and calm yourself first, you can't go there at all.
So
So
true.
that's
I think
how I
sometimes
went back.
the thoughts kind of go so fast that a
Yes.
lot of people, you're thinking them and feeling them before you realize. For it could be for quite a while, right? That, you know, even I catch myself sometimes. You wake if you got something on your mind and you wake up in the night, you're on the, like, I think the description of the train is a great one, because
Yeah.
you're on that train and
Oh,
you
yeah.
can be on it for quite a while before you suddenly realize, and you can break that thought process, that cycle.
It's a like since you're in England, I'm sure people know about the TGV in France.
Hmm.
It's fast, and you have to be the sooner you catch it, the easier it is, because after that it takes momentum and it becomes harder. But I'm passionate about neuroscience, so I use all the tools and the techniques and anything that I've learned, and I mix everything together to really have a strong impact. And that's how I bounced back, because a lot of my friends were like, you need to take antidepressant. And I'm like, no, no. It's my depression is a circumstantial depression. It's not some unbalance in the brain. So the same way that I entered it with my thoughts, I need to slow down. When I'm passionate, I speak too fast. I have to exit it the same way that I entered it. So it became a lot about thoughts mastery and techniques to interrupt the body response and realigning with. There is a field of infinite intelligence, infinite knowledge, whatever you want to call it, the universe, God, whatever your terminology is for it, it's available for us to guide us to. So it's really a mix. And that's how I got out. And after I came back to myself, I realized how painful it had been, how debilitating, and the impact that it can have on your kids. So I decided to change gear and rename my business, Single Moms Doing It All, and start really working with moms on their mental health, and teach them what I call now co-parenting with the universe, having access to that field.
I think, you know, like as you described, and I see a lot of single parents, male and female, they, when you juggling the kids and work and everything else, all of this builds and builds and builds little by little. And I think most of us don't even, and you know, even whether you're in any part of your life, that we get these kind of stresses that come on us, and we're juggling loads of things, and it kind of builds and builds and builds. And I don't think we really realize until there's some kind of breaking point. And the
Exactly.
idea really is, I guess, what you as you work with single mums, is to try and get to that, get involved before the breaking point, so that you don't have to do the rebuild process, right?
Yes, interrupting the downward spiraling. That's really the focus. And because what I realized after fact is that I was living in anxiety for so long, and that had become my new normal. So I didn't even know I was anxious. And when I was able to stop that, I was like, oh my God, I feel like when I was in college, I was so worry free suddenly. I remember catching myself on my couch one day watching TV, and I was like, I feel so peaceful, so great, so free. What's going on? I hadn't realized it had become my new normal.
So how are some of the ways that you now work with the ladies that you work with? What let's say you get a new client, and they're in a similar position to where you were, in your own life. How do you start the process working with somebody?
So I had a client recently. So I have usually a complementary call where we assess what's going on. And her daughter was smoking weed, drinking, only 16, out of control. And it got to a point where the mother was so stressed that every time a door closed, she was jumping because she thought, Ulay, my daughter went out without my permission and went to get in trouble. So I remember I told her, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your daughter. We're going to work on you. And the first thing we're going to do is to calm that jumpiness and to step into your power, because she felt powerless. And that's how I felt too. Define where you're powerless and where you have power. That's crucial, because we try to control stuff that we can't control. Another person, because even though it's your child, it's another person, and you can't control anybody. And when you try to control someone else and you're constantly trying to see what they're doing, you go crazy. It's something that can be done. So that's where we started, defining the areas of control, defining the areas of power, and working within those areas. And as for the areas where you don't have power, connecting with the same life force energy, infinite wisdom that protects you, to understand that it protects them too. And my belief, the people who come to my coaching know that there is a spiritual aspect to it, where most of my clients and myself believe that we have contracts before we come on this earth, and that if somebody has signed to be an addict, you can support them, help them, anything you can, but you can't prevent what they came to do here. And it's extremely hard for a mother, because I had to come face to face with the fact that if, God forbid, my kids came here to die early, I couldn't stop it. But it wasn't now the time to deal with that. Now they're alive, they're fine. So let's put that aside. And it's really about building yourself to a point to know that you have what it takes. You have what it takes. Trust yourself, trust God, the universe. Everything will be provided to you to face what you have to face in the moment. And don't go too far into catastrophic thinking. So that's where we start. And then we start very much customizing based on what they believe, what's going on in their family. It's also a question of self-worth, a question of self-value, and what power you think you have in the world. It's very thorough and broad, because we always start with ourselves. It's always about feeling enough to deal with what you have to deal with. And then, because your brain is designed in a way where you're programmed for survival, so anything that doesn't go right, your attention goes there. And when your attention is on something, there is a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, which will match the outside world, what you see, what you hear, what you experience, with what you're thinking about, even if it's in the back of your head. So when you're on alert, you're going to notice any little danger, any little fact that tells you stay on alert. So it's about calming that first, so you can start seeing things differently and having access to the frontal cortex of your brain to come up with resourceful solutions.
And then you can, the reticular activating system is then what we can use to, in a positive way, right? So that you can then start to build the positive things that you do want in your life, and
yes,
the magic works in the same way, right? In the opposite direction.
Yes,
good stuff.
Yes. Once you're calm and you repeat, even if you have to repeat to yourself 20 times a day, in this moment, I'm safe, my kids are safe. In this moment, everything's going well. You're going to start spotting things that go well, because although one area is completely out of control, all the rest is okay. They're healthy. They're eating, they're sleeping, they're doing whatever they're doing every day. You still have a relationship. And that way you can make your relationship with your kid or anyone you're struggling with something else that disconflict. You can build the loving side, everything else in the relationship too, because you can't support someone when you're on their back constantly. It's going to annoy them, irritate them, and we're like disco balls. When a facet in us is active, we're going to activate the same facet in the other person. So if we are anxious, angry, frustrated, they're going to interact with you at that level.
Yeah, I think something I try and think of, and I'm not perfect at this, is to everybody you meet is some kind of mirror or reflection of you at some point, and it very much does tend to bounce back. Whatever you transmit seems to come back in the other direction.
And it's funny because it works that way. I always explain, so we're covering the brain part with, when I was coaching women on dating, and I was explaining that mirror reflection in others. A woman someone is going to tell her, you're beautiful. Or no, people are going to look at her. If she feels beautiful, she's going to say, oh, I look great today, I love it. If she doesn't feel beautiful, she's going to say, what's wrong, what's going on? So that's exactly that. And that's the brain level. And on an energy level, it's like an elevator. You stop at that floor of, something is wrong, something is, I need to fix it. If we're talking about the kids, I need to be the protector, I need to be on alert. So that's the floor at which you are. That's all you're going to encounter.
I like that. And where does things like routine come in? Because I imagine to try and get some kind of, for me, and I know that you meditate in the morning, and how do you start to introduce routines? Do you start to look at the morning aspect and the end of people's days, and how does that go?
So yes, and before I actually talk about meditations, all kinds of meditations, because when they start, I found for myself that many years ago I started with guided meditation because my brain was going crazy. I had to have a vehicle to attach myself to in order to stay calm. Now I can do it otherwise, but on certain days when I'm agitated, I have to have a support to drive me to stay anchored. So I teach them to anchor themselves in the moment for a few minutes if they can do more. And we calm with emotional freedom technique, which is very powerful to calm the response in the brain. And the more, it's like a cycle. The calmer you are, the more you can calm yourself. And that's where we start. That client that I was talking about gave me some feedback after we did 6 weeks of coaching. She was way better, and her boyfriend told her, you're not. So her daughter did something, and she took her mom and went shopping and had a good time. And her boyfriend was like, what's going on with you? You're not agitated. You're not going crazy. She said, no, I'm not ruining my day anymore. I'm doing what I have to do in the moment with her, but I'm not letting it take my whole day. And that's my goal. It's for them to get their life back, because outside of the kids, you have a life. And if you want to help anybody, you need to start by taking care of yourself. And that's where we start with we don't go right away with meditations. We have affirmations, same thing. It's just a brain training so that you start developing the habit before you even talk about time. The habit every day in front of your mirror in the morning, you say a few affirmations. If you can, you sit down, you close your eyes in the morning, and yeah, I have recorded meditations with my voice. Mm-hmm. I have people love the French accent, and I go really, really soft, and I have a habit of putting people to sleep. So I usually give them more meditation in the evening than morning because I put them to sleep. But we start very small.
And where have you got to now with your own kind of morning routine? How's that?
So my morning meditation, and if I see that on days where I have too much on my mind and I can't meditate, I do the tapping first to calm myself down. And if I really can't let my mind free, I do breathing exercises. And that's my meditation, like, some of Kundalini yoga, breathing, like really intense exercises. Or I don't know if you've heard about Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's, I don't know how he calls it, get the mind out of the body, breathing. So stuff like that. And so I do that. I commune with, I believe that we're supported by our ancestors, guides. I believe that I have guides, and but not all my clients do. I ask to commune with them, and I say hi if you want, because I noticed that when I build that connection, there is a lot of joy in my heart. So I open to the miracles of the day. Whatever gift the universe wants to send me, I say, send it, I'm ready. And that's basically what I do. I do also writing, affirmations in writing, but not so much in the morning. It's more midday to stay on track.
And how do you? So you talk a bit about kind of there's as you talk about the joy there. There's also a perspective, and already thanking for the gifts of the day, and I think there's a framing involved there where seeing the events of the day for the good rather than for the challenge that they present. How do you go about that?
So I used to wake up in the morning with my to-do list in my head, and I didn't like how it made me feel at all. I
No, it's
wasn't even out of bed. I was
staring at
stressed.
Mary
I was like,
Manson.
oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Exactly.
So I said, okay, no, that cannot go like that. It's not good. And I intentionally decide, it's a decision, because recently I had a client who was telling me life is hard when you're a single mom. We have so many challenges. Life is hard. I said, yeah, that's true. But life is easy too. Life is good too. There is always, the two are always present. Which one do you want to look at? That's a decision. It's your decision. I can make it for you. So I intentionally decide to look at, I call them gifts or miracles. You can, because for me, my brain reacts really well to words that are like that, grandiose and intense. And I receive even more good emotions when I do that. It doesn't work with everybody. I have a friend who's more rational than me. And if I talk to her about miracles, she's going to look at me and she's going to say, okay, bye, I'm gone. And so you have to find your own manual if you want. What does work with you? And maybe experiment a little bit. Work with words in your mind. See what words create a good feeling in your body. And use those words when you talk to yourself. Use those words when you say thank you for the miracles today. And when you install that filter, and you're convinced that life is giving you gifts, when stuff happens, that's the sticker you're going to put on it, and you're going to react this way. Like I had a woman last week, I was interviewed in a podcast, and somebody contacted me from South Africa because she heard me in a podcast. And I was like, that's a gift from God, from the other side of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's falling on me. I don't have to do anything for it. I just get interviewed, which I love doing. And this happens. So how do you want to label it? Do you want to be, that's normal, and that's the result of the marketing? Or do you want to say, thank you for the gift? It's on, everyone can decide that.
And the joy definitely comes from the latter.
Yes.
But we give up so many opportunities to feel the joy and to feel the happiness. We're looking for it in all different places when it's already, the opportunities there all the time, and we just pass them up. And what you were talking about there, I can completely relate to. I was probably a bit like your friend not so long ago, a few years ago. I've been like the super rational. It doesn't make any sense, but I found actually what you see isn't necessarily always what's true. And I've definitely been able to experience that by expressing that gratitude continuously, it's impossible to feel negative thoughts or emotions at the same time as expressing gratitude. It's just not physically possible.
Yes. And when you say what you see is not necessarily true, I would go to say that nothing is true. It's all a question of perception.
This is true.
So I always tell myself when I go into negative thoughts, because I deal with a lot of stuff, and I dealt with a teen who attempted to commit suicide. So it's not that it's butterfly and roses all the time, but what do you want your world to be? What you can decide on your perception. You can train your brain to have a more positive perception. And sometimes you can't be grateful. There are days it's just not there. You can't. Then get neutral. Get neutral. But just you have to be consciously doing it, because if you don't consciously do it, it's going to be imposed on you by society. Every message that you can see everywhere now, it's very negative. I know that, for example, this situation with the COVID is not fun. It's not, it can be sad for people who have dealt with that. But if that's what you're focusing on all day, first of all, you're going to lower your immune system and you have more chances to get it. And second of all, I told someone, if my destiny is that I'm going to die from COVID, I want at least to live those days well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's a decision. And I know some people feel like maybe slapping me in the face when I say stuff like that because they're in the middle of something. And I don't say it like that when I deal with people. But that's really what it is. Because I've dealt with life-threatening disease where a few days I didn't know if I would make it. I've dealt with a teen trying to kill themselves, kids trying to be a little bit too much experimental with weed and, those party stuff. It's not that my life is easy, but it is easy at the same time because my perception has changed so much that if the events are not easy, the way that I apprehend the events, the way that I respond to the events become easier. And you were talking about being rational, even with my friends, because I coach my friend, of course, all my friends, when they have something, they come to me, I said, okay, let's do a session. Even if she's rational. So we have this thing where I believe that things happen for a reason, she doesn't. But it doesn't matter because ultimately, what are you doing with what happens? Doesn't matter what you believe. Do the best with what happens, and then you make it happen for a reason. You create that reason. So
that's true. And the big thing is really understanding that the entire universe goes on inside the head, right? So
yes,
experiences, events, everything's going to happen. All of these things are going to happen. And it's not what happens that matters. It's how we process what happens. And the example I give quite often is raining, right? When it rains, some people, you wake up in the morning, look out the window and you have a choice. Some people will look out the window and be disappointed, miserable. Oh my God, it's raining. Somebody else has been praying for that rain somewhere and is overjoyed. And it's the same rain. It's just a different perspective. And I think if we can understand that actually all of how we have control over how we respond to the events that happen around us and to us, and actually nothing external can control how you feel. Only you can control how you feel, right? We say, oh, that made me unhappy. It didn't make you unhappy.
Yeah, no.
You've chosen to be unhappy as a response to an event. And I think it takes quite a bit of practice though, doesn't it?
It does. And because we're not taught that, unfortunately. I wish they would teach that in school. Nothing makes us anything. And the problem is that that decision is made unconsciously. And it's made because of what was installed in childhood, the model of the world, what things mean. Because let's say that in a civilization where doing a gesture that can be perceived here as very aggressive, like giving the finger to someone, you go to a civilization where it's the way they say hi. For them, it doesn't mean the same thing.
Yes.
I know in Italy, there is a sign where you know you do like that.
Mm-hmm.
Your finger, your index and your pinky finger and the thumb are up and the rest of the fingers are down. It means cornuto. That means your wife is cheating on you or your husband is cheating on you. Where you can do that, that can mean love too. I think it's without the thumb when you're in a concert. So what do you associate? What's the meaning? I always have those discussions with my son who's 16, because he uses the young people sometimes use curse words in the way they speak, and that irritates my ears. Like I'm reacting so strongly to that. And he comes to me and he says, Mom, it's just a word. Our generation doesn't attach the meaning that you attach to that word. And that's the discussion we have lately. And I'm like, I don't care. When you're around me, please, I'm not from your generation. Refrain. Use it with them, not with me. And I'm like, and when you're going to be in the professional milieu, when you're going to grow up, it's going to be another issue. He said, no, because I'm growing up with my generation and we're going to set the rules. And I'm like, whatever. But I don't want to hear it.
And the thing is, though, it's funny, it's interesting. I was reading, I'm reading Andrew Carnegie's autobiography at the moment, and he was talking about growing up in Dunfermline as a little boy, and there was a play that he would recite, and in there it had the word, in the line that he would say, it had the word hell. And when they first, and this is back in 1834, I think he was born. And he said that when they would first recite this, they would kind of cough over the word hell because they were nervous and embarrassed to be saying such a bad word. And to my God, have times changed?
Oh yeah. Even when you see, the 1900s or 1920s provocative pictures of women where they were very dressed compared to what we see today, it's really funny.
It's fun, but it's just how it's perception and how it gradually changes over time, and how one thing is, nothing's constant, right? There's just and for one thing, a meaning for one person is not a meaning for somebody else, and now it's it's even generational.
Yes, it is. It is generational and personal. It's really based on our experience. Yeah.
And so we talked a bit about the morning. What about evenings? How do you kind of close your day off?
So evening is more difficult for me. I try to go to sleep on something peaceful. I used to listen to calming meditations. I love Louise Hay. And I used to listen to her going to sleep. But lately, I can't listen to anything. It gets on my nervous system. I don't know why. I guess my body's changing. It's more difficult because sometimes I watch something and I fall asleep because I go to bed very late. And I'm trying lately to not do that, not fall asleep while watching a movie, because that's not the best thing. So when I am able, and I'm fully transparent, I'm not there yet. I was for years and lately it changed. So when I can, I go to sleep with gratitude. I go to sleep with trying to close my eyes and let go of anything and be in the bliss or whatever you want to call it. But that's definitely a work in progress lately, because I'm sure you know about Wayne Dyer.
I know a little bit of Wayne Dyer.
Okay, so Wayne Dyer used to say that, and he's not the only one, it's based on neuroscience as well, that the last thing you see in the evening, you bathe into it all night. So I definitely don't watch violent movies before going to sleep. I don't like violent movies anymore so much. But it's important what you think before you go to sleep. If you think about a problem that you're having all day, that's what you're going to bathe in during your night, and your nervous system, everything is going to be wired. So I try to really calm down, and using breathing too, because when you breathe through the nose, it calms down your nervous system right away.
And on that, it's no coincidence that the evening news is at 10 o'clock pretty much everywhere in the
Ah,
world, right? Because they
yeah,
know full well you're going to watch the news and then go to bed and dream about all of the misery that you've just seen
yeah,
through that half an hour before you went to sleep. So turn the news off before you go to bed. Don't watch the
yes,
news. Don't start your day with news and don't end your day with news, because
exactly.
you're just building a cycle of negative thoughts. You start the day thinking there's no hope, and you go to bed sleeping and dreaming about all of the misery. And so people say, oh no, how will I know what's going on? Trust me, I cut the news out a few years ago and I still know what's going on because people can't help but talk about it.
Yeah, I do too. I don't watch too much. I If I want to keep myself informed, I will read more than listen because it has less of an impact. But like you said, everybody is going to come to you and tell you what negative news
Yeah.
is going on. So
And then you can use the power of the internet these days to go around and try and find out some level of fact or truth, rather than the media spin, which is always trying to put some, generally, fear. I mean, look at COVID at the moment. They're just trying to make us, everybody, as terrified as possible, and unfortunately it's working. But like you said earlier, if you're worrying about this stuff all the time, you're just lowering your own response anyway.
I know I was talking to my mom who's in France. I talk to her every day lately, and they scare them. I don't watch it here too much, but same thing. There are people who watch that all the time and they're scared. I do what I have to do to protect myself. I'm not completely crazy, but I don't want to be scared all day. I can still go walk outside and look at the trees, and I love hiking. I don't have to think about COVID when I do that. So it's a balance in
Mhm.
anything.
Interestingly enough, I saw yesterday that one of the industries that has profited or has seen an increase during this period was big tobacco. Now, is the
Huh.
irony. So we're hiding away, worrying about something that might hurt us, smoking, which would definitely hurt us. This is how powerful the information is that we put into our own heads, and we got to monitor it, because we're allowing ourselves to be terrified of this thing because that's what's being communicated, whilst doing something. Some people are doing stuff that is guaranteed to cause misery and harm further down the line at some point. Instead, it just blows my mind.
It's again, it's a question of perception and what we tell ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves. And people are so stressed, they are trying to calm down, and people who smoke, it somehow calms them down. But it's very crazy when you think about it. If a Martian was coming on the planet looking at that, they would be like, what?
This
What are
thing's
they
bad
doing?
for you. Yeah, exactly. Um, are there any books? Let's say one book on the subject of what we've been talking about. Is there, if somebody's listening to this and they think, "Oh, that's quite," what would be one book you'd point them in the direction of as a good starter?
So it's always hard for me because I have books that I love.
Uh-huh.
Um, One of them, I was talking about Wayne Dyer, so The Power of Intention. But there is a book that is so simple, but yet so powerful, that I come back to very often. It's the Four Agreements from Don Miguel Ruiz, because two of those four agreements really changed my life when I started reflecting about it. One was, don't take anything personally. And when I started doing that, my life changed. I'm not triggered right and left like I could have been in the past. And the other one was, be impeccable with your word, I think. I don't know if it says with your word or being impeccable. I think it was your word.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to stay aligned with truth. And I always tell people, what you think, and I'm trying to not lie as much as I can. Maybe, I don't know, sometimes I give an excuse, but less and less. I mean, I don't go there anymore. But even white lies have an impact, because when you're lying, you're watching yourself lying. The observer in you is like, oh, her words has no value anyway. So then when you affirm, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to build my dreams, you don't believe yourself either. And when you're lying, you know you're lying. And because lies have been connected to being a bad person, you feel less deserving because
Hmm.
it tells you somewhere in your mind that maybe you can be a bad person because you lie. So you don't feel deserving of the best. It has huge consequences. So, of course, nothing is perfect in this world. Just catch yourself when you do it and just realign. And when you learn to put boundaries, to set boundaries with people, you don't need to lie anymore.
I really like that. Something I kind of latched onto a while ago was being able to hear the second voice, as I kind of call it. It's kind of like two voices in your head, right? There's the one that acts really quickly, which is the right thing, and if you got to be able to hear it. So when you, I don't know, simple example, put something on the side rather than putting it in the dishwasher, right? In your head, there's a small little voice that says, "Put it in the dishwasher," and you go, "Nah, it's all right. I'll put it on the side," and you've got to, it's just simple things, and then but if you all through your life that voice is always telling you what you should be doing. Offer somebody, open the door for someone, and if you're either listening or ignoring or not hearing. And I think for once you start to hear that voice and know it's there, then you've got to live with either you're going to listen to what it tells you to do, or you're going to ignore it, and you know full well you've ignored it.
Oh, yes, because when you're not aligned with truth, there is a reaction in your body. I use my body as an antenna very often, even sometimes when I make decisions. If you go into applied kinesiology, you know that the body reacts to truth. And when something is not aligned with truth, or when something is not reconciling in your brain, both parts of the brain are not in sync, and your muscles lose of their tonicity, like you're weaker. So I use that to know sometimes what's the best for me, because sometimes you need to make a decision. And I feel it. I remember when I started really setting boundaries and learning that, telling someone, yes, yes, I'll be there, and then having to come back and say, hey, uh, I won't be able to be there. Why saying I will be there? And you have that anxiety in your stomach. Oh my God, I'm going to have to cancel. I'm going to have to cancel. Why do that to yourself? Learn to say, okay, I'm sorry, that's not going to be possible, or I'm not available, or whatever you want to say. You can feel it in your body. It has an effect. It affects you.
Yeah,
So listening to your body.
it's worse to it's worse to let somebody down in the future than it is to say
It
no,
is.
I can't do it now. 100%,
Yeah.
definitely. But for
Yeah.
some reason, we like to torture ourselves.
But I don't know. I was conditioned to say yes right away. But before I even could catch it from my mouth, it would go out. And I was like, oh my God, I need to intervene on that. What is that? And it's conditioning. It's, I guess, I've been raised in France, so we are proper, and at least in my generation. And no.
You hear a lot. You hear it a lot in the workplace, and particularly with females. My girlfriend will say that it becomes a thing. It becomes a practice to be able to say no,
Oh,
particularly at
yeah.
work. And people just say yes, 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 and they'll get overloaded with work with responsibilities, and then implode in on themselves because
Yeah.
they're too afraid to say no. And I think hopefully these days I'm hearing more that there's a lot of more conversation around it's okay to say no. But I think for quite a while it's been a struggle for people.
That's funny because I came across that too with my clients and the people that I encounter. And when we start talking, so I created a video with tapping, which actually will lower the stress response about thinking to say no, about saying no. So I did a special video to train on that at a brain level. So your stress response about saying no is lower, and you can do that with more ease because it's a
Nice.
big thing.
Who would you say has been the greatest inspiration to you?
So I was talking about Louise Hay.
Hmm.
Um, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer a lot too. Trying to think. It changes because I have phases where there are people that I really, Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer are two that I always go back to, but I have phases where right now I'm a lot in neuroscience. I'm fascinated by the discoveries, so I listen a lot about that topic and how we can use it, because everything I learn I apply in my coaching. So I just discovered recently someone called Andrew, oh my God, yeah, Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist at the Stanford University, conducting experiments and giving talks and interviews. And it's fascinating because we can use it to our advantage when we have this kind of knowledge. So it varies, but I believe, yeah, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay are two of my go-to, and Gabby Bernstein also, but sometimes, yeah, those people.
Interesting. I think the neuroscience stuff is fascinating because how fast it's moved on, even in a very short space of time. I was watching a documentary in the UK last week, and it was following some um, brain operations, and it was like
Oh,
talking removing brain tumors, and they were saying like they were showing the scans of the brain, and they were said until recently we thought this area did this and this area did that, but actually we found that not to be true at all, and there's still
wow.
so much unknown about how the brain works. And the other thing I find very interesting is how much neuroscience seems to discover what some of the mystics have and the
Yeah.
sages have said for thousands of years. And I wonder how much it will ultimately converge at some point in the future.
And that's funny because I, that doctor, Andrew Huberman, that neuroscientist, he was talking about the fact that, so he's very hardcore, mainstream, but he also is interested in Reiki and chakra. I'm certified to do Reiki, so I'm always wanting to learn, and he's exploring those areas too. And science is really meeting spirituality nowadays, and it's amazing because it's not as taboo as it used to be to
Mhm.
talk about energy and being able to use your hands to conduct energy to heal people. We're living in a great time.
Well, they've actually managed to prove as well now that thoughts, the electrical energy and the magnetic energy from thoughts leave
Yeah,
the brain, and you can now measure without.
yeah.
Well, they used to put the electrodes on the head so that they could track the electronic movement. They've actually been able to track the thoughts movement without touching the head.
I think they call it magnetoencephalogram or something like that. I heard that from Bruce Lipton,
Yeah.
when he was talking about the biology of belief and thoughts, and it's amazing.
And the
We are
interesting,
powerful.
yeah, and they talk about. I mean, stumbled across all of this stuff through Napoleon Hill, funnily enough, and with his
Oh,
writing in Think and Grow Rich, and he was talking about the transmitting and receiving of thoughts and all these kind of things, and they've kind of proved that this happens. You particularly look at animals, right? They
yeah,
interact from a telepathic nature all of the time, and we seem to take that bit for granted that they've been able
yeah.
to glance in a different direction. Everyone knows where to go. The birds know how to follow each other, right? It's
And they were saying we are the only ones who override that
yeah.
sense because we have it too. I use that because I work on my intuition constantly, and I used it in my life to literally. I didn't have a GPS in my car, and I used that, the sensations in my hands, to direct myself to wherever I wanted to go. We have that. It's
Mhm.
natural, but we just don't know.
Well, we try and block it out with some rational thought and confuse
Yeah.
use ourselves, don't we? What would you say have been the greatest life lessons that you've learnt? Things that you've taken on board that if you could go back and tell your younger self, what would they be?
I would say relax. I, I, I have a tendency to be too serious, so I always have to remind myself, lighten up, and love yourself. We are not taught that, and when I look back, I'm like, we're always so critic with ourselves, like we criticize the way we look and what we do. When I look at it now, I'm like, was I crazy or what? So that's what I would tell myself. Love yourself and lighten up. It's all okay. It's going to be fine.
I like that. Just, I heard a Alan Watts lecture, and he said like he carried a seashell in his pocket because he'd pull it out and say, look how brilliant this is. Look how perfectly formed it is. He said, do you think that maybe at the bottom of the ocean, all of the other crustaceans and fish are saying, oh, look at the state of that shell. It's got one little mark out of place. Well, that's what we do to other humans all of the time. Like we sit there marveling at this shell, and we're not marveling at all of the other humans around.
Yeah, we are magnificent, and we need to remember that.
I think we just take.
I had people crying when I did a Toastmaster speech one day about that, about the fact that we're magnificent and it's time to go back to ourselves. And I had people crying. I was like, I guess we need to get in touch with that.
We just take it for granted, right? But I think we take everything for granted. Look at even the simple things like banana. Look at the banana. How does a banana know to be a banana, right? We just take it for granted, and if we just take 5 seconds to look around and see everything that is around, everything's fascinating if you allow it.
That's why I love Steven Spielberg, because he kept a child approach to stuff sometimes in his movies. And since I was very young, I remember I always said, I don't want to lose that child approach, because that's what you're saying. It's about marveling on stuff.
Definitely. What would you say? I've got a couple more questions before we wrap up, because I'm conscious of time. What would you say have been the best habits that you've introduced into your life? What are the good habits that you've adopted?
Meditation. Meditation. And I do mirror exercises with myself too, about self-love and self-acceptance. That also changed my life, to be less hard with yourself.
Is that just talking to yourself in a positive way? And
yeah. And know that I'm not perfect, but I'm lovable. And I tell that to myself. Telling that to yourself while you look in your eyes in the mirror is very powerful.
What is perfect? Does it exist?
Yeah, exactly.
We're chasing this thing that does not exist. There is no perfection other than what is already around, I would suggest. My last question for you before we wrap up is, if you could spend one day, I used to have this as 1 hour, but now I've changed it to 1 day.
Oh, that's better.
If you could spend 1 day with anybody, dead or alive, who would that person be?
So if that was somebody who's alive, I would love to spend 1 day with Tony Robbins. I would love that. And somebody who's dead, I would love to spend a day with Wayne Dyer, because he really impacted me.
Good answers. Yeah. Tony Robbins would be very interesting. I think.
Oh my God, it would blow your mind. I've done some. That's who I started with back in time, to go to his seminars and several days events. It changed me. What I've learned there, I still apply today. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I love. Before we go down a rabbit hole, but I love the whole 6 human needs concept and the triad. Those things, just those 2 things that by themselves are incredibly powerful.
So I have a daughter who graduated in psychology. So all those 6 human needs and more. I mean, it was there for quite some time, but when people apply them in the way that he uses them, it's powerful. And Tony Robbins is really a master at what he does.
It's incredible. So where can people find you, Murielle?
On my website, Single Moms, and I know in England it's MUM, in the US it's MOM. So singlemomsdoingitall.com. And you can find everything there, the podcast. I have a membership, the coaching, anything.
It's been amazing. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
giving up your
Thank you
early
for having
morning.
me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, but that's a good way to start the day.
Yes. For me, it works well because I'm starting to wrap up my day, so I end it on a
Good.
positive note, and you can start yours. So thank you very, very much again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to hear more similar episodes, head over to pocketmastermind.com, where you'll also find the links mentioned in this conversation. And if you haven't done so already, please leave us a review. It will really help us to get our message out and let more people know about these episodes. So leave us a review, leave us a rating, hit the subscribe button, and please share with your friends. Until next time, thank you again for listening.